Simone. Today is going to be an interesting day because we are going to go over so many graphs today. I don't even think we're going to get to them all.
Ooh.
But the first and most critical of the graphs is one I am going to put on screen here, and it opens up an explanatory mystery, I guess is what I'd call it. And so what you can see in this first chart is liberal and conservative depression index scores by social media use category, where red is conservative and blue is liberal, and the higher the bar goes, the worse their depression is. And what you see in this chart is that if you are a progressive, the more liberal you are, the more using social media depresses you. But if you are a conservative, that is not the case. In fact, using social media frequently appears to increase your mental health when you're at the high levels of use. Now, what's really fascinating, and marginally, you're still better off not using it at all, but marginally it increases compared to using it some versus using it an absolute ton, at least once a day, specifically here. And then I would point out here that and actually the conservatives who use social media at least once a day have significantly better mental health than the liberals who use it only once or twice a month.
Oh, goodness.
That is how bad it is for liberals, just a littlest bit.
I mean, have you been on Blue Sky though? It is depressing.
Like, that's a big thing that I see on Blue Sky that I don't see on Twitter. Like, I tweet about the asteroid that was going to hit us but then didn't hit us, and I get normal responses. On Blue Sky, I tweet about that, and a bunch of the responses are, finally someone to cure the plague of humans upon this earth.
Here's where it gets really bad. Liberals and conservatives have almost exactly the same rates of depression and bad mental health, and we'll see this as we go to other charts, when they don't use social media at all.
Okay.
Which implies that, and it's broadly known, liberals have way more mental health problems than conservatives right now.
Right.
If you look at white liberal women, for example, over 50% are dealing with a major mental health issue. But what this appears to be saying is this is not like an innate thing about liberals. It's not, and this article will argue the opposite, but like the evidence shows otherwise. It's not like, oh, if you are more likely to get depressed, then you're more likely to become a liberal. It's something about engaging with liberal culture itself
makes you sad.
Is what makes you sad.
Oh my. Oh no.
And what's interesting is we're going to be able to break out the exact parts of liberal culture that do this. The amount that it's not being religious, the amount that it's wokeism, the amount that it's DEI stuff, the amount that it's fear of like being attacked or something like that. And we often talk about the urban monoculture as something of a mimetic virus, which, the iterations of it that are better at spreading spread better. And it appears to, as a mimetic virus, first sort of lower your mental immune system by destroying your mental health before it begins to eat away at your brain. And we're going to see this in the data on this piece. Specifically, what she ends up finding out is first the mental health declines, then a person starts identifying as a liberal, not first do they identify as a liberal, then the mental health declines.
Oh, really? I would have guessed the opposite. That's really interesting. Okay.
So I would have guessed the opposite as well, but what it appears is happening here is that the mental health decline is sort of an erosion of self-identity, self-pride, like self-affirmation ability that is required before people start like rotely accepting woke ideas.
Oh, yeah. Like, I guess it's a lot easier to accept super progressive ideology when you have an external locus of control, for example, plus a lot of self-hatred.
Yes.
Oh, no. Wow. Okay. Wow.
So it builds the self-hatred first. And I think that that's really fascinating. And we can also see from this other graph that it's specifically interacting with liberal culture that makes you mentally unhealthy, and that interacting with conservative culture frequently actually appears to make people a little bit more healthy, mentally speaking.
Well, that makes sense.
This isn't surprising to me at all, actually. If you look at a lot of the types of conservative culture that progressives complain about, and it's like a meme thing where they're like, how do you know your son is a conservative? Well, he exercises and he takes care of his appearance and he
takes personal responsibility for his actions.
He's not looking at porn as much, It's like, okay, but I can see why maybe these things are correlating to higher mental health rates, okay?
Oh, no.
But anyway, let's get into this. So now we're going to go to the second figure I sent you. And these are all from a study, Mental Health Trends and the Great Awakening. So we're starting right now with figure 27. I'm skipping around. I'm not showing the figures in order. I'm showing them to sort of paint a narrative here.
The effects of frequent social media use on internalizing symptoms by ideology.
Yes. It illustrates the average score differences on 7-item anxiety index and a 20-item depression index between self-identified liberals and conservatives. These individuals reported using social media for over 2 hours at a time, at least several times a week, 36% of the sample, compared to those who rarely do, 46% of the sample. Among liberals, those who use social media more frequently score 0.33 standard deviation higher on the anxiety index and 0.22 standard deviations higher on the depression index, compared with those who report never using social media for 2 hours at a time or minimal use. In contrast, these differences among conservatives are negligible, 0.05 standard deviations and 0.04 standard deviations respectively. And this is a different study than the above study. So multiple studies are finding this. People just keep going in and finding that social media is, or I guess I could say conservative online content is not bad for your mental health. It is progressive online content that's bad for your mental health, which means it's not the online content itself that's bad for your mental health. It's not the fact that you're consuming online content that's bad for your mental health.
Thank you.
It's the fact that you are conserving this ideological virus that, as part of breaking you down and sort of turning you into a slave that will go out like an ant infected, like the Cordyceps virus, go out and try to infect other ants, it needs to break down your immune system first, your mental immune system. And what that looks like is hating yourself. Although it uses different, and not, keep in mind, this study was showing not just depression, it was also anxiety. So in progressives, engaging with their social media content increases both anxiety and depression. Although it uses different and arguably more ambiguous measures of social media use, the 2022 wave of American national election studies social media study reveals similar results. Among liberals, average depression scores increase with greater social media use. For example, those who reported daily use of at least one platform, 70% of liberals, 64% of conservatives, scored significantly higher on a 2-item depression index compared with those who never use social media, 7% of liberals and 8% of conservatives. Conservatives show much smaller and less consistent increases in depression across usage levels. Specifically, while liberals who reported daily usage scored 0.34 standard deviation higher on depression than those who do not use any social media, the difference for conservatives is close to zero and not statistically significant. And this is the red and blue graph here on screen. That is absolutely wild how stark that is. Any thoughts before I go further, by the way, or theories?
One thing that stands out to me is that I could just keep thinking about both super progressive and super conservative online spheres can come across as mean, but the mean is very different. There's locker room mean, and actually, you know what? It's mean girl mean versus locker room mean. So the locker room is like calling each other names, pushing each other around, but it's like immediately forgotten and not retained and not toxic. And then progressives have this mean girl mean, which is talking about people behind their backs and being really catty and
organizing lists that of like blocking.
Yes, these people have been, we hate these people and these people need to be destroyed, and everything is retained, everything is held on to. The resentment grows and festers. Whereas locker room talk is locker room talk. You're just messing around with each other. You know, and honestly, that creates anti-fragility. So I'm just in my head, my intuition is going to
really important for like low anxiety, low depression, I think.
Yeah. Well, and it's again building that anti-fragility. You need to be insulted, you need to be pushed. And I think the really great thing about locker room talk and that kind of masculine bullying and making fun is that often it's really like, it's real. You know, people make fun of you being fat as a dude because you're fat. People make fun of you being short or bald as a dude because you're short or bald, right? Like, and those things can really hurt, but they force you to find ways to deal with that and make up for it. Whereas the kind of mean girl talk is very different. It is about systematically destroying and pulling you down as a kind of mate blocking strategy and dominance hierarchy strategy.
Yes. And you do see that these problems are worse for women than men when they interact in online environments.
Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking here.
These findings suggest that even if girls and liberals and boys and conservatives were to spend similar, if not equal amounts of time on social media, the former two groups would be worse off in terms of mental well-being. Among these groups, liberals, especially liberal females, may suffer the most. Not only are liberals higher in neuroticism, emotional and aesthetic openness, empathetic concern, and justice sensitivity, something I hadn't heard about before, but we'll talk about, traits they share with women, but they also tend to score lower in conscientiousness, which likely puts them at a disadvantage in terms of emotional regulation and focus. This further heightens their susceptibility to negative rumination and doom scrolling. In fact, the very limited data we have on the intersection of ideology and doom scrolling from a small study of online sample of 500 of residents of OECD countries indicate that liberal and left-aligned individuals score significantly higher, just under 0.3 standard deviation on measures of doom scrolling compared to the political right. That is fascinating to me. And I think that they are wrong here. What they're seeing is that when people start to engage in these things or have these traits like low conscientiousness, it makes them more susceptible to the mind virus. Because if you have sort of mental discipline, then you're able to, the mind virus hits you and you're like, oh, this is stupid. The people who believe this stuff obviously all are constantly tearing each other down and don't see. I think that this is why consistently, even with progressives, when they're high conscientiousness individuals who have the sort of ability to go out there, found a company, make something work, like a J.K. Rowling or something like that, they typically don't break and they stay and end up on the conservative side. Whereas if they're the type of person who just got their roles through like DEI or moving up a bureaucratic ladder, they continue to sort of hide in fear of all this. I'd also point out that it shows that our opponents really are not like having a good time. Like if you're a liberal, you are a depressed, anxiety-addled mess. It is not awesome. He's recently to a reporter describing what it's like being in the pronatalist movement. And I'm like, it's sort of like the Titanic has sunk and we're in a lifeboat and there's somebody in the freezing water. And I say to them, get out of the water or you are going to freeze to death. Here, let me help you. And they'll say, oh, did you hear what he just said? He said, if I don't get in the boat, he's going to kill me. And I'm like, no, what? No, I said, get in the boat or you're going to die. And they're like, he said it again. He said it again. And I'm like, okay. So I talked them through that. And then they're like, wait a second. Didn't Hitler have a boat? And I'm like, what? No, I didn't. That has nothing to do with the situation. Get in the boat. And then they're like, wait, are you sure there's not any racists on the boat with you? And I'm like, I don't know. I haven't asked these people. And they're like, I knew it. Only a racist wouldn't ask other people if they're not racist. And I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? I'm just saving everyone I see right now. And it's very much like when I tell people your culture won't exist in the future if you can't motivate above your population fertility rate. And they're like, so you're saying you're going to eradicate us if we can't motivate. I'm like, no, I'm not.
Oh, good, look, your friends are here. Hey!
You're supposed to want to have children and this is your ultimate goal in life. It is a very archaic idea, an old idea and representation of a woman.
So you're getting people to sign a pledge basically saying that they will not have children until the Canadian government takes serious action on climate change.
Is that your blood? Well, no, it's college kid blood.
And how many people have signed on so far?
1,381 as of right now.
I know what this is. This is a suicide pact.
Oh my God, that makes so much sense.
We have got to hide all of the sharp objects.
If only I was born with a vagina.
Yeah, solve that problem.
Amen, sister.
Holy Mother of God! Some kid, he just hooked himself right into the wood chipper. What? Head first right into the wood chipper. It looked like it might have been one of the college kids.
But this sort of constant mindset of like needing to vet everyone, having to constantly worry about fears of contamination is mentally incredibly unhealthy.
It's also being someone who has a lot of contamination problems that are not connected to logic, I can tell that there's a mental problem there. Takes one to know one.
Takes one to know one. All right. However, people's social media experiences, particularly the content they encounter, are at least partially influenced by the broader media and political context, as Figure 29 illustrates. Using the salience of the New York Times since about 2011, news media attention to societal issues. These are signs of the urban monoculture when these words are used often. Like racism, inequality, discrimination, sexism has surged to unprecedented levels. Oh, I wonder if it's because they're associated with a mimetic virus. Concurrently, the underlying sentiment reflected in news media has become decidedly more negative and pessimistic. Of course, some of this is attributable to the rise of Trump and his presidency, I'm sure, which serves to intensify these trends and consequently the alarm many liberals felt. So here, if it was because of Trump and his presidency, it would have gone down in the Biden presidency, and it didn't. And here, just across the board, you see this sharp spike upwards in terms of like racism, sexism, oppression, privilege, trauma, discrimination, vulnerable, bias, if patriarch or patriarchy, injustice, inequality. And what's really interesting is they measured this on Twitter, now X, from 2008 to 2023. And what you see is it's going way up like it was with the New York Times. And then there's the Elon acquisition in 2022, and it starts to fall off a cliff with all of these same words, which I think is really interesting. And I think a direct relation. I mean, I bet if you looked on Blue Sky, the use of these words is just off the chart.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to know.
As the tenor and content of social media coverage have become more negative and alarmist, so have the perceptions of sociopolitical issues among young liberal females and males, as shown in Figure 31. Young liberals, especially liberal females, have become much more socially and politically conscious over the last 10 years. For instance, and I think this is just the amount of their brain that the urban monoculture has eaten. It like a virus infecting cells, infects more and more nodes of their brain until all they ever think about is the urban monoculture and needing to spread it. And then eventually they just end up like breaking down and screaming. Like when one of those insects is infected by like a insect that controls its mind and like eats it from the inside, and they get to the stage where they're just bloated and filled with like worms. That's what they are when they're like at GC game conferences last year. All of the like people with dyed hair went outside and screamed at the sky. And it was just like a great, to me, example of just like total mental breakdown. Nothing is left of the host.
All right, I'm not talking to that thing in your head. I'm talking to Skara.
Nothing of the host survives. Your friend had a feeble mind. It suffered greatly and gave in easily.
United States, President Obama is the ex-president. And Mr. Trump, for the moment, steps away for the inaugural address.
But nothing of the host survives. And I think that this is true. You know, once you're this eaten, is very hard to ever come back. And I think that this is why a lot of lefties in the media that they produce, like we were talking this morning about how good 30 Rock was when compared to Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, even though it had the same team. And I think it was 30 Rock, the brain rot hadn't eaten as much as them. They were able to have like really cool and aspirational conservative figures like Jack Donaghy in it, or like, you know, the team.
Well, they made fun of them, but they made fun of everyone. And I think they were still able to acknowledge the existence of and have the presence of conservative figures, whereas it got to this point where like the mere presence of a conservative figure, even if they were the source of ridicule, was considered untouchable. I mean, you saw the same in Parks and Rec as well, where there was a conservative figure.
Yeah, Ron Swanson. You wouldn't have a Ron Swanson in modern progressive media.
Yeah, and he was played by a progressive actor.
Well, remember that progressives can't, and we did an episode on this recently, they really struggle to mentally model conservatives.
Well, but I feel like there's something that degraded, because clearly before that was possible.
And in addition to being unable to mentally model conservatives, they also, conservatives show a great deal of empathy for liberals, but liberals show very little empathy for conservatives. Yeah. And so I think that it's just sort of as the brain rot eats them more and more, I think that this is part of what we're seeing with the Wachowski effect, which I've talked about before. Well, you'll have a great game designer or a great writer, like the people who did like The Matrix. They get trans surgery and then everything they do sucks after that. But I think part of it can just be getting more and more into this culture that prevents you from mentally modeling others as part of it. The reason why the urban monocultural virus has to prevent you from modeling others is that if you could, you would be much more likely to leave it. You would see how imperialistic it is, that its goal is that the colonizer's flag, this new perverse version of the pride flag, is over every country in the world. They want one day this to be on top of every mosque and every, establishment in Africa. They want a true global monoculture as the outcome of this, because that's how the monoculture motivates them to go out and convert people, because they're not motivating and reproducing. It's just a faster way for a culture to spread, but obviously it'll eventually burn itself out. I almost think of it as like a wildfire that's burning through the human population right now and just extinguishing huge swaths of it. Sad, but this is where we are.
Yeah.
As the tenor of content and media coverage have become more negative and alarmist, so have the perceptions of socio-political issues among young liberal females and males, as shown in figure 31. Young liberals, especially liberal females, have become much more socially and politically conscious in the past 10 years. For instance, the share of liberals who say that they frequently think about the, quote, social problems of the nation and the world, end quote. Ugh. Imagine if somebody said that to you on a date. I think a lot about the social problems of the nation and the world. I'd be like, that's such a red flag. Has reached record highs, as has the share who say they are working to, quote, correct social and economic inequalities, end quote, is extremely important to them. Concerns about race relations and environment have also surged, while changing remarkably little among conservatives of both sexes. So that's really fascinating. So if you're looking at this on screen here, the far left category is the female liberal, where you just see it like shooting up during the first Trump presidency. Interestingly, it goes down during the Biden presidency. They're like, oh, I don't care anymore. And second Trump presidency is like, ah!
Trump derangement syndrome on a graph.
So no, it's just constant like freaking out. I bet right now it's off the charts for them. And with the male liberals, it goes up a lot here. But with the conservatives, what's interesting is there are periods where it has gone up, but it seems to actually be going down a lot on average, especially things like, I often worry about pollution and climate change. And I've noticed this within our circles. Like, people don't care about the climate as much as they used to.
Well, I think that after so many, I mean, in our case, decades of being told that the end is nigh, and here we are.
Well, it's not just that, but it's so clear that, like, oh, okay, so we panicked about it, and you had control of the UN, and you had control of the US government, and you had control of the World Health Organization, and you did the Paris Accords, and nothing was achieved, right? Like, apparently it's still a major issue. We shut down everything during COVID, and we only incrementally met the carbon reduction that's expected every year that 1 year. Like, obviously it's not doable. And so I think for a lot of people, they're like, well, what, you just let a large number of species die? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, it's happened before. We are not the first species to cause many liberals. It's so weird to me when they were like, well, there's been mass extinctions before, but like no animal has ever caused a mass. I'm like, yes, they have. Like, have you not heard of the Great Oxidation Event? Like, are you just like, you're so proudly uneducated. It's actually happened in 2 of the major mass extinctions. It was caused by a life form. So yeah, it has happened before.
It's the thing that living life does.
Yeah, humans will find a way to survive without nature. Humans won't find a way to survive without humans. So it's one of these things where I'm like, I'd like nature to be around, but it's really more of a aesthetic concern. I'm much more interested in just categorizing its DNA so it can be recreated at a future date. See what these dire wolves are creating now. You get these science downers, and they bum me out so much. Like, when they made the dire wolves, and somebody was like, oh, it's just like putting them in costumes. They only changed like a few of the. It's like, come on, man. Like, this is literally
specifically what they're complaining about is that they're not genetically identical. Like, they don't have the exact DNA of historical dire wolves, because instead what they did was they altered them to phenotypically be what we could guess is the same as dire
wolf DNA.
They used direwolf DNA to see kind of what was going on, but then used different interventions to adjust it to like make 20% bigger, to make them all white, to do a bunch of other things. And
yes, but they were not. So there's something that some people have tried to do in the past, which is make genetic changes to an animal, not using the original animal's DNA, just to make it look more like an ancestral phenotype. So maybe trying to breed cows larger because it was a larger form of cow in the past. This has been done with a few species. That is not what the direwolf thing was. I misspoke here. This was what the direwolf thing was. Still incredibly impressive nonetheless.
Yeah,
this is a bit like somebody coming up to Jurassic Park and Oh, that's just a big chicken. It's just been phenotypically changed to look like a brontosaurus. Like, what are you talking about? Why are you guys so impressed with this? It's like, some people have a compulsive need to erase all of the wonder from the world into human achievement. There was a woman who we had on our show before recently in relation to AI, and she had a moment like this where she did an episode saying AI is not conscious and we're never going to get AGI. And she used as proof this study that we might go into in another episode, where it showed that AI didn't know how it came to the decisions that it was coming to. And I was like, I wish you had watched our AI is probably conscious in the same way we are video, in that we show that humans work that exact same way.
Yeah, like this is only going to convince us more that AI is human.
Yeah, it's literally, not only do humans work in the same way, but if you ask a human if they work in that way, they'll say, no, I don't work in that way. And they will make up fake memories of how they thought through something. Watch our, stop pretending humans are sapient video, or LLMs are function the same way the human brain does. But anyway, so not only that, but like a human, they will make up having how they got to their end state. So literally every part of that process is exactly the way that the human brain appears to do it. And then people can be like, well, I remember specific intermediary steps in my thinking. And it's like, well, that's just because we don't have AIs looking at their own ledgers right now. But it's not that we can't. If you've ever used like a deep search on Grok or on Google, you can see where it will output the various parts of its thought. You could have the AI have access to that. We just choose to not give it access to that. That's about how we're handling its memory. We're basically erasing the point where it was making markers of what it was thinking that we would otherwise have in our own heads. So I just find that to be like, some people are just so determined to not see the wonder in the world. It makes me sad. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. Trends in socio-political awareness among 12th graders by ideology and sex. So we just went over that. I didn't notice it was 12th graders. That's sad. All right. So despite the significant educational and socioeconomic advancements that women have achieved since the 1950s, figure 32 further shows that liberals now perceive greater discrimination against women in various contexts, including in assessing higher education, than ever recorded. We've gone over this in another episode, and it's just insane. They think women are more discriminated against now than they were like 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Concurrently, the share of female liberals who think their sex will prevent them from obtaining their desired careers, quote unquote, somewhat or quote unquote, a lot, shot up by more than 30 points between 2012, 36%, and 2019, 67%. In contrast, if they've changed at all, perceptions of discrimination against women are lower among conservatives of both sexes today than they were in the 1970s, which is accurate. Like, the conservatives seem to be broadly accurate here. They think that women are less discriminated against as time goes on, where progressives just have this shoot up out of nowhere in 2012. That's where this number just like shoots up, the female liberal. What's interesting is that the male liberal shoots up and then like goes back down. It's still fairly low. Female conservatives going down over time. But this is
in 2012 was Gamergate, right? Like we sort of
Gamergate was was
it 2014?
Yeah, I don't know, 28. I want to say 2014. Anyway, but yeah, this is interesting. Okay, so this is, remember how we had that like what happened in like 2012 question, or 2014?
Yeah, Gamergate was 2014, by the way. You're right. Yeah.
We're seeing the same thing here. It's when they interacted with online culture, this new mimetic virus, is when their perception of reality shot to hell. All downstream of Tumblr. Tumblr came, the Fire Nation attacked, and then everything changed. The Tumblrinas attacked, and now everyone thinks they're a dog. I didn't know this, but they're like, I thought like the dog and furry stuff in school was like completely fake, but there was like this great video of kids protesting outside of school because furries were being allowed to like walk around school and like bite the other kids, and kids were getting like sent to like detention if they like kicked them away, or like they kids weren't even allowed to wear costumes on Halloween, but the furries were allowed to on a daily basis. And it was because the principal's daughter was a furry, apparently. That's why she
dear. Well, that sounds like one crazy isolated case. Most of the instances of furry fear that I've heard of have ultimately been discounted somewhat or
Yeah, I'm very much like chill out about furries, people. Like,
yeah, like whatever.
whatever.
Kids are weird. Like, and there, I remember there were the kids, at least in my high school, who like, there was one kid who insisted on wearing a vampire cape to school every day. We didn't make a big deal out of it. We didn't give him a litter box or like some blood to suck. We just let him wear his cape.
Do you remember the trend where everyone thought they were vampires for a while, like psychic vampires and stuff like this?
No one in my school, I think, actually.
No one at my school did, but I saw it online. You guys are missing the best trends from internet history. This was like early internet. There were all these like communities for them and everything, and they're like, oh yeah, this is big thing.
I had like friends who practiced what they believed to be Wiccan things.
I did too. Yeah.
Yeah, but not.
I remember one was like, okay, watch, I'm gonna make the wind blow, and she's like, we gotta say super still, and then like a gust would come after like a little bit. She'd be like, see, I did it. I was like, okay. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that these people were more susceptible to mimetic viruses.
Yeah.
If you want to see the history of Wiccanism, that it was all basically made up in the 1920s, you can go into our video on that. It's pretty interesting, actually.
Very entertaining.
Other data similarly revealed high degrees of youth pessimism about the prospects of success for women and racial minority groups in contemporary American society. For example, a 2023 study released by Skeptic Research Center observed that 49% of female and 34% of male Gen Z correspondents agreed that women in the United States have no hope for success because of sexism.
Because of now
4%. Yeah, in 2023, women make up like the vast.
What do they think is happening to women?
They make more money than what men do at these lower age ranges. Like what? It's worse than regular discrimination because they are doing it while being ungrateful.
Yeah, this is the worst. That is really bad.
Hey, at least they're going extinct and hate themselves. Like, they could be doing this and having a grand time of it, right? While the rates of agreement were comparable among millennials, 44.5% and 36.8%, they dropped substantially for Gen X, female, male, 23.9%, and Boomer, 25.9%, 15.6% correspondence. Further, as in the MTF data, they also show a marked political divide, with 51.8% of very liberal correspondents agreeing with the statement and 23.2% of very conservative correspondents not. So even within very conservative correspondents, 23.2% in 2023 agreed with the statement that women in the United States have no hope of success because of sexism.
Is this just Rover stuff?
I don't know. These people are mentally, as we know now, like this isn't tied to reality. But now we're going to get to where we break this out, because this chart I found to be the most interesting.
Okay.
I can figure 33 here. Okay. If media-driven increases in the adoption of woke, bias-centered narratives of inequality have contributed to liberal conservative differences in mental health, such differences could shrink considerably when woke beliefs were held constant. Supporting this hypothesis, figure 33, which uses data from the 2022 cooperative election study, shows that a force item index of racial wokeness alone accounts for more than nearly half, 0.5 SD, conservative liberal difference in self-related mental health.
Okay, what am I looking at here?
I'll explain after I get to the end of this, because it's a little hard to.
Yeah.
For perspective, religiosity alone accounts for just under a third of this gap. So half of the gap is accounted for by wokeness, but a third is accounted for by a lack of religion. So wokeness is more damaging to an individual than not having religion. Racial wokeness is more mentally damaging than not having religion, but only by a degree, not like dramatically more damaging.
That's interesting because, I think a lot of people turn, of course, to progressive mainstream urban monoculture culture because they have abandoned their inherited cultures, but you have to fill that void to make do with the complexities of modern society. And yet this is making things worse.
Yeah. So what you see here, which is absolutely fascinating, is if you, and so every line here that you're seeing, like every set of graphs, is how much of a difference this makes with the far on the left one, conservative versus liberal, the middle one being female conservative versus female liberal, and the far right one being male conservative versus male liberal. But you can see there's really not that much of a difference in here. It affects them all about equally. But what you see here is if you adjust for one, religiosity, I find really interesting because it appears that religiosity has more, or not having it is more damaging to females than it is to males. Which makes sense because females often go to like crazy other things when they're not religious, like Wiccan and like crystals and stuff like that. Whereas males typically go to atheism or agnosticism, which is a much more mentally healthy way to deal with reality.
Maybe not. I think women are more consensus building and like community oriented, it would seem. So the lack of community that comes with strong culture would be felt more by someone who is more inclined to community. No.
Yeah. So if you adjust for all covariates, and this is really interesting. So specifically here, this is adjusting for racial wokeness, religiosity, and self-rated physical health, demographic, socioeconomic indicators. You get between conservatives and liberals almost the same rate of mental health. So it really is entirely explained by racial wokeness and religion.
Wow.
That's almost all of it, because that's the pink graph here, where it's only a little bit higher than putting in everything.
That's crazy.
The relationship between attitudinal wokeness and poor mental health outcomes has also been found outside the US, with a recent Finnish study showing that agreement was the statement, quote, if white people have on average higher income than black people, it's because of racism, has the strongest correlation with anxiety, depression, and general unhappiness.
Oh.
One, that's like obviously a wrong statement. Like there's a bunch of other things that could cause that. But people who are in the urban monoculture, one of the beliefs of the urban monoculture is that people aren't different. No one else believes that people aren't. Everyone else is like, yeah, there's like cultural differences between people at the very least. And it could be something in Black culture that's causing this disparity. But they cannot say that within the urban monoculture. In the urban monoculture, everyone is exactly the same, which is ironic because then they're like, diversity has value. And it's like, why does diversity have value if everyone's exactly the same? Like, we're not bringing different perspectives and proficiencies to the table and predilections. Why do I need an equal number of men and women in my company? Why not just have all men? Presumably it's exactly the same as having an equal number of men and women. Presumably it's exactly the same. Like having only white people is presumably exactly the same as having some Black people. So there's no benefit to it. Like, why would I do that? And I find that really interesting.
That is really interesting.
All right, now we're going to go back to some other parts of the study. So we're getting out of the area that I found the most interesting in the study. Importantly, as depicted in figure 19 below, sourced from 3 large and recent studies of US adults, some of the same personality facets that distinguish girls and boys similarly distinguish liberals from conservatives. This is likely why we're seeing them split into 2 different camps.
Those deviating political divides.
Yeah, women are more voting progressive and men are more voting conservative. Similar to the pattern observed in sex differences, we see the withdrawal aspect of neuroticism encompassing depression and anxiety facets, the openness aspect of openness/intellect encompassing aesthetic sensitivity and emotionality, and the compassion aspect of agreeableness encompassing facets like fear-mindedness and empathetic concern, are all positively linked with a liberal left-wing political orientation. Conversely, the facets of conscientiousness and certain facets of extroversion, such as assertiveness, are associated with conservative right-wing political orientation. And you have a graph here showing that. Because girls and liberals tend to score higher than boys and conservatives on key factors of neuroticism, openness, and agreeableness, all of which are positively associated with justice sensitivity, it follows that girls and liberals would also likely score higher on justice sensitivity. Data presented in figure 20, drawn from separate studies of US adults, supports this expectation. Across studies on most, if not all, 4 aspects of justice sensitivity, observer, beneficiary, perpetrator, victim, women score significantly higher than men, and liberals score significantly higher than conservatives. The bottom row of figure 20 additionally shows these ideological differences hold within each sex, with female liberals outscoring female conservatives and male liberals outscoring male conservatives. That is really fascinating, because this, actually I want to go down and take like, what is justice sensitivity? Taken together, the data shows that girls and liberals tend to score significantly higher than boys and conservatives on personality traits associated with mental health challenges, and significantly lower on those associated with psychological resilience and stability. Oh, really? This is a funny thing. Like, I, as a guy, can be like, girls be crazy, and they'll be like, and I'd get canceled for that. I'd be like, no, like biologically, girls are like kind of crazy. Okay. And here, this is a research paper saying this data shows that girls tend to score significantly higher than boys on personality traits associated with mental health challenges and significantly lower on those associated with psychological resilience and stability.
So
Specifically, they
unfortunate.
are less conscientious and more neurotic. In other words, some of the traits that help explain the poorer mental health outcomes of girls relative to boys may also be relevant to explaining the poorer mental health outcomes of liberals relative to conservatives. In fact, this vulnerability in girls may be tied, at least in part, to their disproportionate alignment with liberal left-wing ideological orientations. And here, what you can see interesting is digital connectivity among adults 18 to 29. This is for 12th graders, a comparison of internet usage with political orientation and sex. And what you see here is liberals just use this stuff a lot more than conservatives. Here, I'm going to think it's because of lower conscientiousness. They are more susceptible to addiction. So they start using this stuff and they can't turn it off as easy.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think any sort of approach to addictive stimuli is going to be, people are less likely to recover from it if they are progressive, because there's this progressive attitude against removing in the moment pain. And the only way that you're going to get through addiction is to remove in the moment pain, or I mean, is to endure in favor of long-term benefit, right? So,
and here I'll put up 2 more graphs which show the same thing. I'm not going to say it again, but it just shows liberals using this much, much more than conservatives. Now, this was really interesting. Differences in emotional responses to social media content and interactions, as well as attention to certain types of content, may be equal, if not more relevant to understanding the sex and ideological gaps in mental health. First, higher average levels of neuroticism, empathetic concern, and justice sensitivity among girls and liberals would likely make them more sensitive to negative social evaluations, aesthetic, moral, intellectual, when interacting with others on social media. While this proposition cannot be directly tested, Figure 24 presents suggestive evidence drawn from MTF survey on 12th graders. Specifically, girls, irrespective of political orientation, and liberals, regardless of sex, reported significantly higher levels of concern about how they were perceived by others. Interestingly, during a 2017 to 2022, the share reporting concern has grown 13 to 17 points among the liberals and 12th graders of both sexes, and 12 points among conservative females. In stark contrast, no net change is observed among conservative males, who, as we've seen, tend to be fare comparatively better on base indicators of mental health and report the lowest rates of frequent social media use. So this is a grade of within 12th graders. I often worry about how other people react to me. And what you're seeing here is liberals just being way more concerned about this, and also women being way more concerned about this. But interestingly, that concern has gone up over time.
that makes sense. Again, the progressive subculture in general is much more focused on conformity, consensus building, etc. Whereas the renegade sovereignty, libertarian leaning culture is now the conservative culture.
Well, I actually would think it might be something else. It might be even a desire to want to confirm makes it easier to force you to be a liberal. Because liberalism today, being the culture of the urban monoculture, the dominant cultural group, is going to be much more conformist. You're going to be afraid to stand up against that. And so if you have this deep desire to confirm and be approved by other people, that's going to happen to you. And you're going to, it's the core thing that it uses. Like if you look at the urban monoculture, it's like, it gets you to fall in line by like screaming racist or something like that, or transphobe, whenever you say something that like is dangerous to the urban monoculture's proliferation. To continue here, recall that neuroticism, openness, and agreeableness are all predictive, and conscientiousness negatively predictive of the reported frequency of encountering social media and content that triggers feelings of depression and loneliness. So all of these negative traits are predictive of how effective the social media things are going to be at hurting you. And liberals go into spaces where the content that hurts them is more frequent, which is really interesting. As we saw, like they doom scroll more, and we just know this from liberal spaces. Conservatives actually seem to like, in terms of the content, they like content that affirms their pre-existing beliefs a lot more, instead of just.
Do they more than conservatives? I just feel like that's a human thing.
With conservatives, it's affirms their existing beliefs and look at the other side getting their comeuppance. Like videos of leftists crying after an election, or leftist women who left guys, ending up sad as adults, or I always tell Simone
progressives like that too. I've been seeing, because I follow both a lot more than you do. I think.
Yeah, they do like not my face, like a leopard wouldn't eat my face or something.
Well, no, now they're like, MAGA people are now regretting their choice to vote for Trump because of the tariffs. Like, they're 100% doing that too.
What MAGA people is this? Like, I actually
I don't know. I haven't watched the videos, but I've seen the title cards, and they're trying to make this argument. And I think maybe the same reaction would be had by a progressive when they're like, what single cat lady is crying because she's all alone? She's happy, so I don't know. I don't see that as plausible.
I love it. I also see progressives like freaking out, like Trump's putting in tariffs, Trump's firing woke, like people who are involved in DEI. And I'm like, yeah, he told us he was going to do all of that when he was campaigning.
That's why we voted for him.
Out of the blue. This isn't like a surprise. This is what he was running on. If he didn't do it, it would be a sign of a lack of integrity. Anyway,
this was the plan.
Given these relationships and the sex and ideological differences in personality traits, we would expect women and liberals to report encountering such content at significantly higher frequency than men and conservatives. Data graphed in figure 25 confirms that they do. So I'll just go straight to the graph here and we can talk through it. Sex and ideological differences in reported frequency encountering social media content that triggers negative internalizing emotions. Men versus women and liberals versus conservatives. Again, you just see that they're encountering this stuff at way higher rates. And I think, again, they do seem to seek it out a bit more. The conservatives are winning, and look at how bad they're doing is like a common liberal thing. So, and then here we have a graph that shows trends in relation between daily screen time and negative mental health outcomes among high school students by sex. And it's looking at unaliving, ideation, all three traits combined, mental depressive episodes, suicide plans. And you see just this stuff going up slightly, but not that much. And so what I would actually take away from this is, and I seem to remember looking at the data on this, and so it was nearly statistically not relevant. So it is not the internet that's causing the rise in unaliving rates. It is progressivism or some meme that's in the environment that people who are LGBT are more exposed to, and women are more exposed to, and progressives are more exposed to. I would guess it's the urban monoculture.
Your friend had a feeble mind. It suffered greatly and gave in easily.
If it's everybody who walked in that particular room like fell out sad. Like, and now I will note here, this is where you get the trends of young adult mental health and smartphone social media use, and you see it all going up. And so you get this perception of, oh, it's smartphone stuff. But what we're seeing in the other data is, no, it's progressive stuff, which is being transmitted through smartphones. If you're a conservative and you have one of this, you're just not getting as big a negative effect, or potentially any negative effect at all. Here I note a graph that says trends in religious importance and attendance among 12th graders by political ideology and sex. Now, this is interesting because what we're seeing here is female and male liberals, it's going like way down. But generally speaking, female conservatives are much more religious than male conservatives. The orange line is female conservatives and the red line is male conservatives. So that's fascinating. Whereas it's actually true with liberals as well. Male liberals are less religious than female liberals. The blue line is male liberals. The purple line is female liberals. So that's really interesting. Anyway, Simone, we are going to head off this, and I guess I can do the last graph here. And these are the effects of the big 5 personality domains on the frequency of encountering social media content that triggers negative, positive emotions.
Oh, wow. Who knew there'd be a correlation? That's interesting.
Yeah, so extroversion is like middling. You get a openness and intellect causes seeing negative things more. Neuroticism is very big in terms of seeing negative things.
I guess that's not surprising.
Agreeableness, slightly big, but not that much. And really negative in seeing these things is conscientiousness. So conscientiousness is just really protective. Neuroticism, really bad. But neuroticism is higher in women. I'm sorry. I'm gonna get so canceled for that because I've read a graph.
I think
we all know it. Like,
yeah, women's odds of depression in adolescence are higher. It's just, it's known.
I'm not using gamer words anymore on the show, so I can just say bees be crazy.
Yes.
Because I'm so responsible now.
women have a different constitution. They're inclined to
rotundities,
hysteria.
You know, it turned out that whole needing to like masturbate women thing to get rid of hysteria, turned out to be like a thing that was made up by like one person.
You mean it wasn't a widespread treatment?
No. It was like one historian lady who was like a feminist wanted to like get one over on her boss and like made it up.
Like the eating spiders meme? That's hilarious.
Like number of spiders.
Wow. There you go.
I can see why it spread. It's very catchy.
It's hilarious. Yeah. But wow, that's incredible.
All right. Love you to death, Simone.
I love you too, Malcolm. Let's not go crazy. Okay.
I'm more worried about you're the one who's going to go crazy. We've seen the data.
I've already gone crazy, so we don't have to worry about me.
Yeah. You can't, you could go double crazy.
I can. Oh.
Because we're going to be talking about a lot of graphs.
Yeah, the new Twitter thread I sent you was about a psychologist or researcher who wanted to test the ability of psychologists to diagnose conditions. It's quite interesting because
it's a famous case study, Simone. I'm very familiar with it.
Okay, so you know about that one where he like sent in normal professionals like a painter and other stuff too.
People haven't covered it enough recently, so like I'm totally okay with doing it again, but
thank you for the graphs you're sending. I love me some graphs. Actually, I don't. I think that I'm not really able to read graphs well, as you can tell. You may have noticed a pattern.
Where I try to show you a graph and you're like...
And I'm like, the graph, there are lines trending.
And after this point, I'll just maybe describe the graphs to you.
Because I won't understand them anyway. It's because I'm a woman, Malcolm. Why are you trying?
Well, I could probably find some graphs about that.
It's like showing statistics to a pig.
They're all your favorite car?
Yeah.
Wow, and look at this, Toasty. When I turn it over, there's a bunch of blank spaces for more cars. You can keep your car safe in here.
Mom.
Okay, we'll open it up. Look. 1, 2. Wow.
This was upside down.
Oh my goodness.
I opened it because it was upside down in there. And now they're all cute. Oh, this is sweet.
Can you say thank you, Grandpa Steve?
Thank you, Grandpa Steve. And this one's sweet. And this one's blue. And that one's wet. See, this one's wet.
Wow.
And this one's orange. And this one is squee. That's like Stacy's squee car.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And the yellow one.
That is so cool.
Whoa, let's put them back.
Yeah, now you have the coolest car container to keep your car safe.
Yeah, this is the truck to hold all of your cars. This is the truck to hold all of my cars so they can be safe.
Is it your favorite thing ever?
Yeah, it is.